Hello, my name is Andres, and today we'll be talking about the Z-CoiL Springs. So the Z-CoiL Spring system is really the foundation of the suspension capabilities for the Z-CoiL shoe. The amazing thing about the Z-CoiL Spring, it has a massive 1-inch suspension distance. So the spring will actually compress over an inch, where most shoes compress about a 1/4 inch. This gives Z-CoiL shoes 4 times more compression distance than ordinary shoes. And that's what gives people such amazing relief with the Z-CoiL shoe when you're talking about injuries related to impact. So let's talk about the Z-CoiL Spring. So the first thing to understand about the Z-CoiL Spring is that there's 4 tensions. So there's a small, a medium, a large, and even an extra large. And so the small springs, the small shoes are already loaded with the small springs. The medium shoes are already loaded with the medium springs, the large, and the extra large. And so that's pretty straightforward, and rarely do you actually have to alternate those. The more important thing to understand is the springs can actually be rotated in 4 different configurations. So there's 4 tensions, and there's 4 configurations. So the springs at the factory are basically always set. Here would be the left spring, and here would be the right spring. And so they always point outward like this. And so this would be the left spring, this would be the right spring. And so here's how the springs would actually sit on the bottom of the shoe. And the reason that's important is because there's a strong side and a soft side to all the springs. And so the strong side of the spring is always on the outside of the shoe at the factory setting. But if somebody overpronates, you'll want to actually rotate these springs in 180-degree increments. And now what you actually have is, you actually have the strong side of the spring on the medial side, or the inside of somebody's foot. It does a phenomenal job in correcting pronation. So this is a more severe case of pronation, but you can also rotate the springs in 90 degrees. And 90 degrees is a more mild adjustment for pronation control. So once again, the factory settings are always with the end of the spring pointing upward and on the outside and pointing to the outside of the foot. So let me show you how you actually put the springs, on the Z-CoiL shoe. So basically, inside all the Z-CoiL shoes, there's actually a little trap door. And so if you look underneath the insole, the removable insole, you'll notice that right inside there's actually a screw. And so what you do is you take a screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, and you simply back out that screw, and you'll notice here's the spring, this is the right shoe, and you'll notice the configuration of that. This actually goes right here to the right hand side and ends at the very top pointing outward, just like this configuration. So that's the standard setting, and that's the setting that fits most consumers. You'll want to watch a consumer walk, and when you watch them walk, and if you notice they're pronating, that's the time you'll actually basically rotate the spring in either a 90-degree configuration or a 180-degree configuration, or even a 270. But a 270 and a 90 is for more moderate cases of pronation. The 180-degree adjustment is for more severe cases of pronation. And once again, all you have to basically do at that point is basically put it back on the shoe and then screw it back together, and you're done. So that, in a nutshell, is the 4 different configurations that the Z-CoiL shoes can be adjusted to. Okay, so and the last thing about the Z-CoiL shoes that's pretty simple is that they can be enclosed. And so all the Z-CoiL shoes have the ability to have an enclosure. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's the same shoe we were talking about. Here's the factory setting on that shoe. one of our better selling Z-CoiL shoes. But you can take off that spring system and you can actually put on an enclosed spring system just like this. So what you basically do is put that on, get your drill, close it, and just like that, basically now you have an enclosed spring system. Now this shoe is called the 1.0 shoe, but we also have a 2.0 shoe, and the 2.0 shoe has a little bit different configuration. This enclosure is completely attached, and so it doesn't separate from the outsole. But the 2.0 system, here's the 2.0 shoe. I don't have the upper on this, but you can see how it attaches to the orthotic. Well, in this case, what you'll actually do is just get an enclosure top and actually drop it right on top of the spring, and then you'll basically take your shoe, put it right on top there, and then you'll screw it together, and that's how you have an enclosure with this system. The nice thing about the 2.0 system is you can actually take the spring and rotate it 90 degrees and still enclose it just exactly like it was before. So that's a 180 degree configuration right here. And there you have an enclosure. So once again, with the Z-CoiL shoes, there's some important things to understand about the Z-CoiL Spring. There's 4 tensions, a small, medium, large, and extra large. The more important point is there's 4 configurations that you can actually adjust that spring to. 9 times out of 10, you won't have to adjust that shoe unless that person pronates. If they're over pronating, that's the point where you want to adjust that spring 90 degrees or 180 degrees to correct for that pronation. And last but not least, you can enclose all the Z-CoiL springs. And so a lot of people, particularly if they're wearing something like a boot product, they're going to want to actually have that enclosure in most cases. And so most of our boots actually ship with that enclosed spring system. So here's a boot with the open spring system, and here's a boot with an enclosed spring system. These are 2 different models. This is a 1.0 and this is a 2.0 boot. But once again, it looks a lot better with the enclosure. And let me just show you real quick what that'll actually look like in this boot with an enclosure. So you'll want to take your screw gun, take your Z-CoiL spring off. This is a right hand boot. You'll put the enclosure on that boot. You'll put this back together again. And there you have it, your 2.0 enclosed Z-CoiL boot, that simple. So that's a little about the Z-CoiL springs. Thank you for your attention.